Good morning and welcome to a joint launch of the 31st edition of the Global Financial Centers Index. This joint launch is between us here in London and, in fact, technically in Leicester, Mike Wardle, and then we're hoping to be joined by Mr. Daher from Abu Dhabi. And it should be, I think, quite an interesting session today. We do seem to be having some technical difficulties at the moment connecting with Abu Dhabi, and we may rearrange things just a little bit, but let's get cracking because there's a lot of ground to cover as we're going to cover well over 116 financial centers. So anyway, next slide, please. Okay, well, you know me, I'm Michael Minelli. I'm one of the directors of Zien. And I'm only able to introduce so many of these webinars because of the tolerance and generosity of our sponsors, including Abu Dhabi. And of course, we do this work in conjunction with the China Development Institute. Next slide. Today's format is, as ever, with FS Club and Zien and Long Finance. We try and keep these short and punchy. My job is to get out of the way as quickly as possible, but I will give a few housekeeping rules. If we are joined in time by Mr. Daher, we'll get a view from Abu Dhabi, but failing that, Mike Wardle will be covering the results of GFCI 31, and hopefully Mr. Daher can join perhaps after that. I'll be making a few observations, and then we're going to move into the Q&A. We appreciate, as ever, not just questions and answers, but also observations, comments, insights that you may have. So a few rules on this one. Firstly, yes, it is being recorded, and the recording will be available in about 2 working days, so sometime over the weekend, for you to share with colleagues or friends. Secondly, we will be taking Q&A, so please do use the GoToWebinar facility for that. When you type into the GoToWebinar facility, your email is attached, and Mike and I and Mr. Daher can get back to you. It makes it very easy. But we are here with you, not on email or Signal or Zoom. So please do use that question facility, and we will try and get back to you on that. And finally, the report itself has gone up. It was just launched an hour ago here in London and has already appeared in City AM. But the report is available online, as well as the presentation, and the presentation slides are available also. So I think that's probably about as much as you want to hear from me. And I'd like to hand over then to Mike Wardle, who's going to go through Global Financial Centers Index 31. Mike, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Michael, for that introduction. As I say, we do have some slides from Abu Dhabi, and assuming that Mr. Daher can join us, then we'll go back to those. But in terms of the index results, first of all, a bit about the background to the Global Financial Centers Index. Zien runs a program called Long Finance, which is designed to answer the big question: when we know the financial system is working. And the idea is that looking over the long term to assess the contribution that the financial system makes to the world economy. The GFCI is a factor assessment index. That means we take 2 different sets of data to combine them. We take assessment data from the GFCI survey, which runs continuously online, with quantitative data, and we use advanced statistical modeling to combine those 2 sets of data. And we've been using this technique not only for the GFCI, but also for the Global Green Finance Index, the Smart Centers Index, and other longitudinal research for some time. Looking at the number of centers, one of the features, I guess, of the world of international financial centers is the growth in the number of centers over time. When we first published the GFCI, we rated 46 centers across the world. We now have ratings for 119 centers, with 7 associate centers who haven't yet crossed the threshold to enter the index. And in the most recent edition, we add Atlanta in the US, Lugano, and Ho Chi Minh City. Looking at the respondents who get involved in completing the survey that underpins the GFCI, first of all, you see that by industry sector, we had good coverage across a whole range of industry players in terms of those who are engaged with the GFCI. And by region of the world, you'll see that Asia Pacific still provides the majority responses to the survey, but we do get responses from all regions of the world. Now the results, the top 20 centres in GFCI 31. The first thing to note is there's actually quite a lot of stability at the top. Most centres have not moved or moved 1 or 2 ranking places, with a few exceptions. Shenzhen moves back into the top 10, displacing Paris on this occasion. Madrid moved up 6 places to come into the top 20. But there's an awful lot of stability. And the other big point, I think, is that beyond the leaders of New York and London, you'll see that there's very tight packed scores for the ratings within the top 10 centres. In terms of other headlines, as I mentioned, New York held on to top position in the index, while London remained in second place, although it dropped 14 points in the ratings. Centres in the top 10 were closely matched, but the average rating across the whole index, not just the top 20, was very stable. The average rating just less than 1 point lower than at GFCI 30. This suggests that in the last half of 2021, confidence was returning to the world economy. We'd had quite a lot of volatility in the index in the last couple of editions. But we can't escape the fact that the invasion of Ukraine by the Russian Federation will affect future ratings, and we cannot predict what those will be as yet. We can say the performance of Russian financial centres is likely to fall sharply following the imposition of international sanctions. But there's a lot of uncertainty, I think, ahead in terms of the effect of geopolitics on the financial system. Separately, in the GFCI, we published a fintech rating. In this index, New York and Shanghai retained first and second positions. Beijing and San Francisco overtook London to take third and fourth place. And I've mentioned the new entrants to the index. Looking at regional performance over time, this is an assessment we make of the average rating for the top 5 centres in each world region. You'll see that in this edition, North American leading centres, you'll see that North American leading centres have just overtaken those from Asia Pacific, with Western Europe coming further down. But we also see that there's a close correlation, a convergence between performance amongst the average rating for the top 5 centres in the regions. Taking the top 5 centres in the index overall and ratings over time, you'll see that New York is starting to build quite a significant lead over London in second place, and that Hong Kong, Shanghai and Los Angeles are neck and neck in terms of the rating, with Los Angeles and Shanghai both having come up the rankings recently. And this is shown also in the rank over time measure, where the top 3 centres in GFCI 31, as you'll see, have been tracking along the top of the index for some time. Shanghai and Los Angeles have come from behind in the rankings to come and pressure the top ranking spaces. Turning to regional analysis, first of all, Western Europe. The leading centres in Western Europe have performed not as well as some other regions. You'll see that most of the leading centres in Western Europe have fallen in the ratings in this edition of the index, with only a couple of exceptions. Asia Pacific has had good performance in this edition of the GFCI after some falling back in GFCI 30. And you'll see that amongst the leading centres, all of them have maintained their ranking place or improved it, other than Singapore. In North America, generally, North America had a good performance in GFCI 30, very slight shading back in GFCI 31, but the strength of the US economy does seem to be driving good performance by the leading North American centres. In the Middle East and Africa, we have We have Dubai taking the leading place in the region, but with Abu Dhabi taking second place. Casablanca remains the leading centre in Africa, and generally a good performance from this region with quite a number of centres moving up the ratings. Looking at Eastern Europe and Central Asia and the leading centres, and just mentioning in passing that Moscow, we believe, will in the future drop sharply in the ratings. And generally, more centres have dropped in the rankings in this edition of the index than have improved, but there have been improvements in Kazakhstan and indeed for Athens. Looking at Latin America and the Caribbean, Mexico City continues to lead the region, just ahead of Rio de Janeiro. There's been some good performance in some centres, particularly Sao Paulo and Bogota, but still some difficulties for centres in the Caribbean. We classify in the GFCI financial centres profiles in terms of different aspects of their position. First of all, we have global centres. These are the ones that are very well connected across the world. So in the GFCI survey, a lot of people from a lot of other places in the world know that centre and rate them. And similarly, people from these centres have a lot of connections, business connections with other parts of the world. These are the ones that meet that criteria. We then also look at whether they are diversified in terms of their business profile, whether they are specialists in finance, and for others, they are contenders. They are working their way towards. Just noting that Seoul has moved into the top left corner of this table, the global leaders having been global diversified in the previous edition. We then come on to a group of financial centres who are still well connected across the world, but less well connected than those in the global in the global quarter of the table. And you'll see that quite a lot of these centres are leading centres in their regions, but perhaps not yet established on the global stage. And then some local centres who really are focused on financial transactions in their very local area, so have fewer international contacts, but they might be very strong international contacts, no less, in their region. Because we use two sets of data, the quantitative data and the assessment data from the survey, we are able to cut the data we have in a variety of different ways. One of those ways is taking all the quantitative data and then running the index model just using the survey assessments from people working in different parts of the industry. So only those working in banking, only those working in investment management. And this gives us some industry sector sub-indices. The first thing to note is that the leading centers in the index also lead across a number of these measures. For example, New York here is leading in all but one of the industry sector sub-indices, London in second place overall, in second place also in 4 of these measures. But this does allow us to pick out particular strengths for centers, just looking at Shenzhen coming second and first in banking and insurance, looking at Luxembourg coming high in professional services compared with its overall rating in the GFCI, Beijing amongst financiers, Zurich coming scoring high in government and regulatory. So this allows us the beginnings of a differentiation between financial centers, looking at their particular strengths. I mentioned earlier on the fintech rating. Again, this is the top 20 on the fintech rating, with Beijing and San Francisco just easing London into 5th place. But again, as in the main index, really quite a lot of stability in this grouping. Most of the centers in this top 20 were indeed in the top 20 in the last edition, with some movement in between. And again, Madrid coming up strongly. Just a brief word on reputation advantage. This is a measure we use to compare the average assessment that people receive in the GFCI questionnaire with the overall rating assigned to the center in the GFCI. we'll see that on those that have a high score reputational advantage, we have some centres, Gift City Gujarat, Qingdao, Stuttgart, who have very high reputational advantage. And this means, in effect, that their marketing is very good. They are able to persuade people to rate them highly in the questionnaire, and probably, in our view, above where they would be rated if we only relied on the quantitative data. You'll see also that some of the leading centres in the index, London, for example, also, and Singapore also have positive reputational advantages in this list. At the bottom end of that same table, what we call reputational disadvantage, are centres where we believe, based on the quantitative data, these centres are performing better than their reputation as shown in the GFCI survey. So these are a group of centres that have a potential opportunity to use marketing to explain to people around the world their strengths and therefore to, over time, improve their reputation and the scores they have in the GFCI survey. I'm now going to pass back to Professor Minelli to give some observations on the results that we see this time.
Thank you very much, Mike. Yeah, a couple of things I might want to point out on this slide that's coming up is really to look at a little bit of the detail. I mean, firstly, just taking away from it, in many ways, it's a no news index this time. As Mike pointed out, there's tremendous stability in North America, Asia, Western Europe. And in fact, looking at the compression in the ratings over time, one might argue that they've sort of maxed out or topped out and are tightly competing with one another. I think one of the things, though, that you might remember is that less than 2 years ago, due to the COVID restrictions, Asia, in particular China, was seen to be surging forward, and that was reversed 6 months ago and continues today. So all three regions seem to be going quite well, and with the exception of noting the conflicts in Ukraine, which, as Mike pointed out, might change positions quite markedly. In truth, it's showing, in our opinion, quite a bit of stability. The financial services sector seems to have stabilized in an uncertain world. And let's not forget that before the invasion of Ukraine 4 weeks ago, there were still quite a few uncertainties looming around in geopolitics, but also in trade statistics, supply chains and supply chain stability and resilience. And so there was a lot happening, and yet financial services was fairly stable. However, we do like to dig in, and I'll dig in just a little bit here. What I'd like to point out is that the full report contains much more than Mike has managed to compress into less than 20 minutes. And there are a wide number of areas of competitiveness, particularly when we look across the vast range of centers that we're examining. So this next slide gives you a little bit of a flavor about our co-host. This next slide gives you a little bit of flavor about the areas of competitiveness when looked at as sub-indices. Now again, New York at the #1 slot also happens to have the #1 slot in all 5 areas of competitiveness: business environment, human capital, infrastructure, financial center development, and reputation. London takes 4 in the #2 slot. And then it starts to fragment, and it is interesting to see how people rate fairly differently centers such as, I'll just pick on one here at the moment, Paris, or another one which might be Tokyo, where they bounce around, and these areas of competitiveness really need to be pulled together if these centers want to rise in the index. And the more diverse that is, probably the more work that they have to do. Now, the next slide has a quick look at some of the ways in which this analysis can be conducted. And our co-host here, Abu Dhabi, actually comes out extremely well. Now, Abu Dhabi has made tremendous strides over the last 10 years, but even more importantly, I would say over the last 4 or 5, in recognizing the importance of developing the financial center, setting out a strong regulatory regime, demonstrating its stability and its intention to succeed in this space. And all of that has been coming together. So on the left, you'll see a slide which looks at those areas of competitiveness you saw earlier. And on the right, we'll have an examination of some of the industry sectors. Now, these spider diagrams can be read in a number of ways, and I would hasten to point out here that we have in a light beige GFCI 25, so we picked up from 3.5 years ago, and GFCI 31 here in red. And of course, you get better the closer you are to the center, which is a little counterintuitive in a way. But you can see that 3 years ago, Abu Dhabi, in terms of its competitiveness rank, was fairly well down there on both business environment and human capital. I'll come back to human capital in some of my closing points, but what I think is exciting here has been that the work that they have done in creating the proper business environment, special economic zones, the fact that they're high in areas like arbitration and expert determination and have invested in this has paid off. And so the business environment ranking, which is arguably one of the easiest of the rankings to change. You've got to get people to move in. That's hard. Infrastructure is fundamental. Reputation takes a long time to build. But this business environment rating has improved very, very swiftly. Human capital has also improved very, very swiftly. So you can see this tightening here, showing that Abu Dhabi, as I said earlier, is pulling all of this together. On the right, you can see the effect that that has had, again, in various sectors. Banking has certainly improved. Government and regulatory has seemed to be very, very, very good. So those are fantastic. But that has in turn attracted more professional services people. And you can see here the enormous rise in investment management as well. So a lot of things happening there. And whilst insurance maybe seem to be lagging against what is frankly fantastic performance, you can see that insurance too has improved quite markedly in a very short period of time. What I think this shows, and this is one of the reasons that financial centers are so attractive to policymakers who are seeking to improve the economy and jobs and trade, is that small changes to what you're trying to achieve can be made through policy mechanisms alone. So a tremendous improvement in Abu Dhabi's position, and you can see it's been a concerted effort to do so. Now, this next slide is not to pick on Mauritius, but it is to show that it can go the other way. And you can see here Mauritius having kind of spread a bit more rather than in fact increased a bit more. Now, this has got quite a bit to do with some of the FATCA and other gray list areas that Mauritius has fallen into. And I'm conscious that Mauritius is working very, very hard to improve on those, but it can go both ways. The final thing I'd like to point out, and we're sort of very curious about this here at CN, and that's that the quality of living element. One of the things that the pandemic has shown, as you look at this slide, is, Mike, this is the slide on, thank you, on attractive places to work. One of the things that the pandemic has shown is, of course, that there's probably much more flexibility in financial and technology services than has hitherto been assumed. Once you decide that you really want to run a virtual business, you can do so. And this has meant that we at CN have to question, what does it mean, for example, to be based in Abu Dhabi or to be based in London? If your staff are working anywhere in the world, then are you really truly a firm rooted to one particular place, except maybe for some tax purposes? So that's kind of one area. Second thing, of course, is this is likely to accelerate. Clients are now beginning to demand the right people. So they don't want the right people who can commute to New York City or commute to London or whatever. They want the right people, and the right people will work where they want to work. So we believe that there's been quite a shift, and this shift is going to accelerate towards the attractiveness of places in which to work. Now, I've started as attractive places to work, and that brings in certain connotations. But of course, attractive places to work are attractive places to live. And in our index, we're starting to see a shift in the weightings towards the attractiveness of places in terms of the basic human fundamentals, good schools, good sanitation, easy connectivity, quality of life, etc. Now here, of course, Abu Dhabi is turning up in our index very, very high. You can see here it's 5th place amongst the financial services community. And I think this shows this interlinking because, of course, attractive places to live Also, you want to have a good job, and you want to have a job that you find interesting and rewarding. So there's a nice resonance here. And I personally find it amazing that Abu Dhabi has moved up so rapidly in our index to take 5th spot. But I do believe that this attractiveness is going to be extremely important in the future. So Mike, those are some observations before we move over to our guest. Mr. Daher, welcome. We're delighted to see you. And we have just altered the agenda a little bit due to the technical issues. And Mike is going to hand over to you to present Abu Dhabi, and then we'll come back for questions and answers. Mike?
So I'll take the slides back to Mr. Daher's slides and leave the floor open to him. Just apologies while I move through. Mr. Daher is the Chief Executive Officer of the Registration Authority at Abu Dhabi Global Market, our partner for this event. Mr. Daher, we're very, very pleased to have you with us and look forward to your presentation. Please do ask me to move the slides on when you wish to move the slide on.
Sure. Thank you, and apologies due to technical issues for this, and we had to change the program as planned. But if we could go on the next slide, Abu Dhabi Global Market and Abu Dhabi. I mean, today Abu Dhabi as a. If I may go to the next slide, please. So Abu Dhabi is the capital of the United Arab Emirates. It contributes to 60% of the UAE's GDP. As you can see, it's ranked #1 of ease of doing business in the Middle East and 12th globally. In terms of ADGM, it's a 100% waived or a 0% corporate tax. The UAE is actually introducing by June of 2023 the corporate tax that will be coming in next year. In terms of its location, and actually this is the number that people always maybe they haven't known about, but actually 40% of the entire world is actually in a 4 hours flight away from Abu Dhabi. And in terms of time gap, you could see there's an 8 hours time gap between the East and the West. In terms of economic growth, Abu Dhabi GDP is 350 US dollars billions, which is accounting to the 2/3 of the UAE economy. We started with the part of the government reforms and ensuring that to make it an attractive place to live and work. The Golden Visa has been offered to its residents for a 10 years visa, which consists more stability and encourages people to come and live in here. In terms of safety, of course, Abu Dhabi is being ranked the safest city for several years now in a row. And that shows the government commitment. And I think also if people would look at the UAE and specifically to Abu Dhabi and the way it handled the COVID situation during this pandemic, it proves how the government is actually working closely with the businesses, with the people, and everyone visiting or visiting the United Arab Emirates and specifically Abu Dhabi. We can go to the next slide, please. As you can see here, of course, Abu Dhabi, with its robust economy, backed and supported by the government, you could see here the growth rate, 3.4% in the GDP. The 3 of the world's largest sovereign funds in excess of 1 trillion USD. Abu Dhabi private wealth estimated to hold 145 billion US dollars. The annual crude oil production is 1.1 billion, and you could see here the FDI inward flow at 13.788 million. If we could go on the next slide, please. ADGM. What is the ADGM? So Abu Dhabi Global Market is actually sits within the heart of Abu Dhabi. It's the financial district, and which is founded through a different legal structure. Of course, while building the community, we looked at it from different aspects. How do we create a vibrant community? How do we create a place which is not going to be dead after 5 p.m.? And you could see you've got the ADGM and the authority building, which is where the entire licensing, the financial services, and regulating the entire community and the jurisdiction, which is Al Marja Island. You would see we have a retail which sits under the main authority building. You've got hotels where you've got the Rosewood and Four Seasons Hotel, which are anchor names, and both provide not only rooms which you lease out or rent out per day, but including apartments on a long-term and a short-term apartment. Recently there has been launched the residential units, which is under construction. And what people might not know, it's actually 80% already sold out since they launched. And in terms of healthcare, we've got really the state-of-art Cleveland Clinic, which is just 2 minutes away from where I'm sitting. If we may go to the next slide, please. How is the financial free zones established and which formed ADGM? So basically, law number 8 of 2004 establishes the financial free zones, where they actually had to amend the constitution of the UAE. And the main reason behind that is that the civil and commercial laws of the UAE are disapplied. Then the federal decree number 15 of 2013, which establishes the financial free zone. In this case, it's Abu Dhabi Global Market. The cabinet resolution was issued in 2013, which sets out the geographical location and the jurisdiction of the ADGM. And Al Marja Island is the jurisdiction of ADGM. Law number 4 of 2013 sets and defines the structure, the governance, and the role and responsibility of each authority. So the ultimate legislative body is the board of directors, and under that comes 3 independent authorities. One of them is the registration authority, the financial services regulatory authority, and the ADGM courts. If we may go to the next slide. Registration authority is basically the commercial regulator of this jurisdiction. From day one, since we launched in mid of 2015, we went digital by default. We're responsible in terms of administering the commercial regulations, registering and incorporating of legal entities, real properties, and security. The Financial Services Regulatory Authority is a risk-based regulator who's been progressive and responsible in terms of regulating financial activities. One of the main achievements is actually going into in the fintech arena. We've launched the first virtual assets regulatory framework a couple of years back, and now we've just recently went to the market with our version 2.0, which is enhancing the virtual assets framework based on market feedback and how we can enhance this sector even further. The ADGM courts, which basically governs, it's the law and order. And I could see part of the ranking of the GFCI, the law and orders as a main parameter and how to see. And that's actually what I consider is the most important element in the ADGM, because it's where investors, businesses, and every individual are protected. When ADGM was launched, yes, it took us some time to set a precedent, but as of date, the recognition of the ADGM courts has expanded. We see a lot of businesses opting in order to take advantage of the legal framework, the course, which is the first digital court in the world, where you can do go through the entire journey without actually being present in the court. supported by our Chief Justice, Lord Hope, who built it and developed it. And as of today, you could see that the jurisdiction and the recognition of our judgments has been recognized globally. And that's really sets the foundation on how the ADGM court really supports the ambition and the growth of Abu Dhabi in terms of investor protection. If we may go to the next slide, please. So the support of ADGM and the government of Abu Dhabi is really demonstrated by our board members. And this is the second board. Our first board was headed by a Minister of State, His Excellency Ahmed Al-Saiq. But as you can see today, we have the business, all members within Abu Dhabi. So His Excellency Ahmed Al-Zaabi is the chairman of ADGM. He held a previous role as the group CFO of ADNOC, which is a multinational oil company. Our vice chairman, His Excellency Mohammed Al-Shurafa, who is the chairman of the Department of Economic Development, Abu Dhabi DED, including he's the chairman of ESCA and also the chairman of Etihad Airlines. And you could see also as our board members, we have the Undersecretary of Department of Finance. We have the main people within the sovereign entities. We've got members from Abu Dhabi Investment Authority, Mubadala, ADQ, and of course, EDGE when it comes to the security side of things. So we can go to the next slide, please. So the three independent authorities, as you can see, the registration authority is headed by myself, Emmanuel Giovanakis, who's been a main pillar of ADGM and building the financial services. He started his journey from day one in ADGM. And of course, our Chief Justice and the CEO and Registrar, Linda Fitzallen, within the ADGM courts. May we go to the next slide, please? What ADGM offers to its clients: international standard best practice when it comes to laws and regulations. And it's one key element. The ADGM applies a direct application of the English common law, and that really sets the tone and the language and how we maintain our regulations, supported by an independent ADGM courts. Since going digital is part, and being innovative is part of the DNA within ADGM, we went through digital from day one, and the journey starts from the first day you apply until you complete of onboarding your team members, and more initiatives are being enhanced to ensure a smooth customer journey. In terms of an ownership, 100% foreign ownership. There is a 0% corporate and income tax. As we speak, actually, the number of the double taxation treaties of the UAE, which also applies to the ADGM, has increased from 94. Now it's on 103 with double taxation treaties. No restrictions on repatriations of profits. How do we support that? By ensuring that we have a strong ecosystem and talent. And one of the main initiatives that ADGM did is launching the ADGM Academy, which focuses on talent development within the financial sector. And since inception till date, we've actually, international firms have chosen talents that graduated from this academy in excess of 200 members as of date. Let me go to the next slide, please. The areas of focus. So basically, our legislative system is sector agnostic. When it comes to the sector, we focus, but in terms of a strategy and a focus of ADGM, we look at the banking, we look at the asset management, capital market, and fintechs. Within the non-financial sector, we look at the corporate sector, where we actually host major main headquarters and treasury hubs for different institutions. family businesses, and this is really, and family offices, that's really to support the wealth management, since Abu Dhabi is rich in wealth, and we are not talking from a sovereign, but we're looking at it from a family and businesses, and this supports the development of these sectors. Professional services sector, which consists of all the legal, accounting, consultancy, including associations. Entrepreneurship and innovation, we supported the tech sector, as has been announced just yesterday. We look at Hub 71, which is based at ADGM jurisdiction, which is a government initiative, has invested and supported startups in excess of 400 million as of date. And to support the business environment, we've looked at multiple and different legal structures that support of ring fencing and protecting your assets, such as having an innovative structure when it comes to the special purpose vehicles, foundations when it comes to family and successions, including trust and many other legislative frameworks. If we may go to the next slide, please. As of date, so since this slide has been actually a few days back, as of date, we have in excess of 5,100 registered entities, 211 approved financial entities, where the workforce of 17,000 plus people working and residing within the Al Marja Island. And you could see that from 2015 till 2021, we had a 300% growth in terms of the licensing side of it. Of course, this is all supported by a healthy pipeline in both sectors, financial and non-financial. If we may go to the next slide, please. As you can see here, some of the major names that we have within the jurisdictions: Citibank, BNP Paribas, Marsh within the insurance sector, from local and international firms, ADCB, the UAE Exchange, State Street, and so on. And within the family businesses, you've got the Lulus, Stumpf, which are international families who chose ADGM to domicile their family office. And if you look at the professional services, from Walkers, Linklaters, to KPMG, Maples, and so on. If we may go to the next slide, please. So this is when it comes to the ADGM and the growth of ADGM. We are focusing and enhancing whatever we have in both sides, if it was within the traditional finance and also within the new age finance. And here I would like to conclude and thank you for hosting us.
Mr. Daher, that was superb. Thank you very much. We've got a number of questions in here. We've got about 15 minutes to cover some of them. And if I may, the first question is for you, Mr. Daher. It's from Juliet Wigsel. Juliet's curious, in your presentation, you covered a lot of ground, but could you perhaps indicate what you think is the most important change you've made in Abu Dhabi that has led to your recent success?
In Abu Dhabi as a whole, you would see that in the latest change that took place, which is took not only on an Abu Dhabi, but on a UAE level, and I think that was a big step. One is changing working days. I mean, Friday used to be an off day, where on Saturday, and as of date, you could see Friday is a working day, and Saturday and Sunday is actually an off. And that's really to meet within the global standards and to be able to work with all. Another big step when it came to setting up ADGM, and for people who know Abu Dhabi, for ADGM to be a direct application of English common law in this jurisdiction, that's a major step. And that shows the commitment. What people don't realize, as ADGM, we carry the first two letters, and that means credibility. Today, and this is Abu Dhabi, and Abu Dhabi made sure that they worked around all of these initiatives. Some of the big steps that they looked at the consolidation and listing of some of their entities, the likes in Fertiglobe in the Petrochem, ADNOC Drilling, which really boosted even the exchange, Abu Dhabi exchange. So if you look at their numbers between last year and this year, it's actually grew by 120%, which means on their daily volumes, which encouraged investments from all over.
Great. Mike, a question for you from Francis Chung. Hong Kong has imposed one of the most stringent COVID restrictions in the world. How does that affect its financial status? Any thoughts on the political environment? But I think in terms of competitiveness in financial sector development, Francis points out Hong Kong ranked 11th, is it particularly weak? But overall in Asia Pacific, which city is the biggest rival to Hong Kong?
Okay. Yeah, I was talking to colleagues in Hong Kong a couple of weeks ago, and I think their concern is that continued COVID restrictions may make it more difficult for international talent to come and work or visit in Hong Kong. So I think that the answer is that if the current situation continues for any length of time, it could be that Hong Kong becomes slightly less attractive as a destination. But as we've also seen during the pandemic, digital connection means that one can conduct business in different ways. So I think in the longer term, if there were still to be restrictions in place, there may be an effect on Hong Kong's human capital scores because of the difficulty of getting international talent to move into Hong Kong. But at the moment, I think there hasn't yet been that effect. And in terms of the political environment in Hong Kong, a couple of years ago, I think the Hong Kong financial sector was quite worried that again there would be a shock to its reputation. That doesn't seem to have happened. That at the moment, at least, financial businesses are seeing the rule of law continues in terms of commercial law, well-financed banking system, and at the moment, it doesn't seem to be, the political environment doesn't seem to have affected Hong Kong's position. All that said, there is, I think, a concern in Hong Kong that in the next 15 to 20 years there are going to be challenges to its position as the leading gateway to the Chinese economy and to other parts of the Asian economy. And the kind of places that are interested, I think, in seeing whether there is business to be won from Hong Kong are certainly other Northeast Asia centres, Tokyo, Seoul, Busan, all looking, I think, to see if there's an opportunity to pick up business from Hong Kong. And of course, Singapore, still a major competitor for Hong Kong and will be going forwards.
There's an interesting question here from Bob McDowell. We all understand that when people look at financial centers, they don't look at the center on its own. They also look at the national environment, and particularly the financial national environment. Mr. Daher, do you detect that growing fears of inflation are likely to have an impact on global financial center rankings in terms of good management of the national economies?
When you could see the, I think here as the UAE has been maintaining the level of its inflation, of course, through the efforts of many governmental bodies, like the Central Bank and the UAE as a whole. I think with what's been happening across the world, their inflation rate will be increasing, but within the UAE has been maintaining a 2% and less than 3% inflation rate, but that's really also covered by the business growth and opportunities and supported by that.
We have another question for you, Mr. Daher, from Rajiv Seghal. How is the FATF grey listing likely to impact Abu Dhabi, and what can Abu Dhabi focus on to counter any potential negative impacts?
Abu Dhabi is committed to enhance all of the, and the UAE did many efforts to improve this. I think this is just a short obstacle, but this is being overcome as we speak with many initiatives, and the UAE is committed when it comes to anything in relation to AML, CTF, and so on. So I believe this would be with the efforts being done by the UAE hopefully will be looking at a positive outcome in the near future. And the executive office of the money laundering is the competent authority to really oversee this, and we work closely with them in supporting it from every government entity within the UAE and specifically Abu Dhabi.
There's a question here which I think comes to me. What has propelled Madrid into the top 20? It is rarely mentioned, even in an EU context, as a significant financial center. As somebody who's actually worked in Madrid and knows it reasonably well as a financial center, I kind of disagree. Firstly, Madrid is just moved from barely outside the top 20 into position 18, so I think it's ranked fairly appropriately by the community. But what people forget is that the Spanish banking industry at its core underwent 20 years ago some amazing revolutions, and it's an extremely strong center for South America. And the international connectivity with South America is often hidden from the rest of Europe. And in fact, when it came to Brexit, the estimates were that Madrid attracted approximately 3,000 to 5,000 workers from London, which would put it up at about half the size of what was attracted to Dublin and about the same as what was attracted to Milan. So Madrid is certainly not a weak center, and I think somewhere around the 20th mark is a fair ranking. Mike, we've got a couple of questions here. Chris Tate points out that I mentioned the business environment and human capital ratings can be improved quickly. He'd like a few examples. And Abdullah Osman is asking, what are the top 3 elements that could be a focus for centers looking to grow, which I think is, pretty much there. But if you had to pick 3 things, and Mr. Daher pointed out, I thought it was really exciting. The law, was definitely one of them. The commitment to English. So soft cultural changes can make some big differences. Mike?
Yeah, I think that the business environment and human capital ratings, business environment is almost solely within the gift of a financial center and the decision takers around that financial center. So the way that you set up your business rules to be open, welcoming to people from other cultures, to make it easy to set up a business, to make it well regulated so people feel confident and so on. All this is within the gift of the decision makers in a particular city or center. And so that's why I think we say the business environment is something that you can shift reasonably quickly, whether that's setting up a special economic zone or whether it is moving the whole of a country's business rules in the right direction. I just add to that, though, that part of that is also ensuring that you have the rule of law very clearly in place, that you have good anti-corruption mechanisms, because part of business environment is not only how welcoming you are and how easy it is to run a business, it's also how confident people are in the legal system, as Mr. Daher was saying, in terms of the ADGM courts. In terms of the top 3 elements that could be a focus, and hi Abdul, it's good to have your question. When you're looking at the external environment, the elements I think to look at is, first of all, are you treating everyone fairly? So do your rules and regulations of business environments and so on mean that anyone in an international context can come to your center and expect to be treated fairly? If they are, then you're well on the way. The second element is on human capital. There are challenges in the future, whether it's through digitization or sustainability, and Abdul, that we have been working on this with the ARC, and you need the right skill base to address those challenges, which will be a mixture of making sure that you're open to external talent, through visa regimes or other ways of attracting people. Secondly, that you are homegrown your own talent, so you have a good education system with a focus on the skills needed by the financial sector, whether that is digital skills or more traditional financial skills. And you need to think about reskilling the existing workforce. You have people who maybe were very, very up to date in their training 20 years ago, but really need to understand what the future is. So in terms of human capital, there are things there that you can do, and I think that also answers Chris's question about how you can address the human capital question. And sorry, Michael.
You might.
I was going to say that Abdul asked for 3 elements, and I think one is being fair and open to all. Second one is human capital. The third is making sure that you are a really good place to live, as Michael was saying earlier. Being a place that people want to come and live, not just to work. And so you have an awful lot going on culturally. You have a mix, as Mr. Daho was saying, of the residential and the education and the work, and the culture is also really important.
Okay, we've got just time for one more set of questions. And Mr. Dyer, really, I think people are very interested in your thoughts, particularly coming out of the UAE. We have Anders Lennart. Some of the countries and financial centers are reluctant to impose economic sanctions in Russia. How might this affect future views and scoring? And Elena Delgova dialing in from Moscow. Do you see challenges arising as Russia calls for gas payments in rubles? So any thoughts there on how that might geopolitically shift things?
I think this is a UAE level as a whole, where the government has really showed this stance, and in terms of their voting and how they're looking at it. The only thing I could say is I hope that this part of what's happening ends up really soon, so that the entire economies will be focusing on how to work closely together and grow. But we do follow the UAE stance, and I think I'm not the right person to speak about this point, but basically the only thing we wish for is things go back to normal.
Actually, we can squeeze in one more, just a quick one, if I might, from Elizabeth. Very curious here about how does Abu Dhabi work with the other states within the UAE? How closely are you aligned in terms of financial center development?
So, well, people during I've joined ADGM from day one, and I recall that date closely. And being the first over here, how did we build our journey? Really demonstrate will answer that question. When Abu Dhabi works on collaboration and partnership, prior to doing anything within the ADGM, we started by working closely with the markets, with other governmental bodies, and we are here to complement really the UAE strategy. So we went and collaborated and entered into multiple agreements in order to ensure that we can give the investors a transparent and a predictable way of doing business, and to be really to sit and live and enjoy being as part of this country. So we cannot reach this level by working in silos. So the UAE government, Abu Dhabi, really focuses on the collaboration and with everybody in the UAE and every other centers. So if it's we've as the ADGM entered into multiple MOUs and agreements that really smoothes this journey across borders from mainland to a financial free zone and other jurisdictions. So our success is based on this collaboration and in partnership model.
Fantastic. Well, folks, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. A number of things. Firstly, we have posted a UAE Abu Dhabi bulletin in the chat room. You can subscribe to that to get regular news on what's happening over in the Middle East. I'd like to say thank you for all the vibrant questions and comments that we've had here. Not enough time to cover them all. However, I would point you to the very detailed publication online and well worth perusing for detail about specific centers. But may I thank in particular Mike and the team for all of their hard work in preparing it. But moreover, and delighted to have you here, Mr. Dar, may I thank our co-hosts, ADGM, for coming online today, answering the questions and giving a lot of good color about what it's really like to be a financial center in this listing. Thank you very much, everyone, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.